Good morning. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the children's early sensory experiences and how they interact with innate predispositions in the development of lifelong flavor preferences. As we all know, parents and caregivers face the difficult challenge of providing children with a balanced diet that promotes healthy growth and development. The USDA recommends that families meet this challenge by feeding children a diverse, nutrient-dense diet that contains a variety of healthy foods such as fruits and vegetables. However, children's diets in many parts of the world fail to meet these recommendations. For example, similar to adults, children's consumption of fruits and vegetables in the US is well below recommended levels. This is a serious public health concern because we know that eating habits developed in childhood track into adulthood, and poor dietary habits are a risk factor for several diseases, including type 2 diabetes and hypertension. However, as many parents lament, ensuring that their children's diets meet dietary recommendations is difficult for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that children tend to dislike vegetables and prefer sugar-sweetened fruits and foods and beverages. So, how do we work with parents and children to help children develop healthier eating habits? And the first step is understanding the development of children's sensory systems. Over the past couple of decades, our understanding of the infant's flavor world has expanded substantially. We now know that children live in a very different sensory world from adults. In this presentation, I'm first going to talk about the chemical senses and how these sensory capacities work and when they develop. And then we're going to discuss infants' responses to basic tastes with a focus on sweet and bitter. And finally, we'll discuss how early experiences with tastes, odors, and flavors can shift inborn preferences. Flavor is a powerful determinant of human consumatory behavior. Although in everyday language, the terms flavor and taste are often used interchangeably, flavor refers to the integrated sensation that arises from the combined input of taste, olfaction, and chemosensation. On this slide, we can see that while taste consists of about 5 different sensations, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and savory, smell experiences are much broader, consisting of 1,000 or more different odors. Chemosensation, which consists of sensations such as temperature, cooling, tingle, is also an important contributor to flavor. However, in this talk, we're going to focus primarily on the senses of taste and odor. So starting with the sense of taste. We know that it arises from stimulation of receptors on the tongue and throughout the oral cavity. The surface of the tongue is covered with bumps or papillae, which contain taste buds, and these taste buds are made of taste receptor cells. The tip of each taste receptor cell protrudes through a pore on the surface of the tongue. Receptors bind taste molecules in a lock and key mechanism and activate the taste cell to send an electrical message to the brain. Now clearly, if that was all that was going on when we ate a meal, we would experience a very bland diet. But fortunately for us, at the same time that the receptors on our taste buds are detecting these basic tastes, our olfactory system is stimulated by the smell of the food. There are 2 major routes through which this occurs. The orthonasal route comes from the food on our plate and in through our nostrils. The other pathway, which is known as the retronasal route, reaches the olfactory bulbs from the food that we are chewing in our mouths. Rather than coming in through our nose, these odors travel up through the back of our nasal passages to reach our olfactory bulbs. Receptors from our olfactory epithelium and taste buds send messages to our brain where they converge with information from our taste system to provide us with the perception of flavor. So you can see that flavor is much more than merely taste. And I'm sure you can remember a time when you previously had a cold. During these times, our nasal pathways are blocked, which essentially prevents odors from reaching our olfactory pathways. As a result, we often complain that our food has no taste, but in fact, it has no odor. And so you are only able to detect the basic tastes of the foods. Now that we have an understanding of how the chemical senses combine to provide us with flavor sensations, let's move on to talk about the ontogeny of flavor preference development in childhood. An important piece of this story is understanding when the taste and smell anatomical systems develop. Relative to other sensory capacities such as vision and audition, the sense of taste begins to emerge relatively early. Taste and olfactory systems are well developed by the second trimester. Behavioral studies using a variety of techniques suggest that by the last trimester of prenatal development, taste buds are capable of detecting and communicating information to the central nervous system, structures that are responsible for organizing and controlling affective behaviors. Similarly, the olfactory bulb and receptor cells are functional by the last trimester. So given the extensive prenatal development of the chemosensory system, it's not surprising that the newborn is sensitive and responsive to odor, taste, and flavor stimuli at birth. And we can see evidence of this at birth. Researchers have used facial expressions which suggest liking or rejection of foods, and they have shown that within hours of birth, infants exhibit a strong preference for sweet tastes. As you can see in this picture, when a drop of sweet taste is placed on the tongue of a newborn, they respond with facial relaxation and sucking responses. In contrast to sweet taste, newborns will purse their lips and wrinkle their nose in response to sour taste. They grimace and arch their lips and protrude their tongues in response to bitter taste. And finally, unlike other tastes, the ability to detect salt does not appear to develop until 4 months of age. And at that time, infants begin preferring salted solutions to plain water. These reactions to taste stimuli appear to be universal in humans. Research studies conducted in several countries across the world indicate that infants respond to the basic tastes in a similar manner. And this suggests that these preferences are innate reactions that are not learned. It is also important to note that the heightened preference for sweet taste that we observe in neonates continues throughout childhood and into adolescence. In 2001 and again in 2009, a group at the Monell Chemical Center in Philadelphia asked children between the ages of 9 and 15 years and adults to taste 4 solutions of sweetened water that differed in concentration. And here we have their most preferred level of the sucrose concentration. If you focus on the red and blue bars, you will see that at both time points, children are preferring significantly higher concentrations of sugar than adults. And this demonstrates the heightened preference for sweet tastes that we see in childhood. Just as we saw for the newborn, the dislike for bitter taste is in stark contrast to the infant's response for sweet taste. Here we see an infant trying her first taste of a green vegetable. And I think her face says it all. For some of us, this dislike of bitter taste and bitter green vegetables will continue throughout our lives, and to some extent is dependent on our bitter taste receptors. Some people are much more sensitive to bitter taste than others. From an evolutionary perspective, these responses serve important biological functions. In nature, bitterness is often associated with toxins, whereas sweetness is associated with readily available calories from carbohydrates. And although this may seem adaptive, in today's obesogenic environment, children's basic biology predisposes them to favor foods and beverages that are high in sugar content and dislike bitter tasting foods such as bitter green vegetables. If this is the bad news, the good news arises from our knowledge gained from experimental research on how beginning very early in life, sensory experiences can shape and modify flavor and food preferences. In the last section of this talk, we will discuss the multiple routes by which flavor learning occurs throughout development. Given that the olfactory and taste systems are functional before birth, the developing fetus is exposed to a rich sensory environment that is constantly changing within the womb. This is because the odor and flavor of the amniotic fluid reflects the diet of the mother. This has been shown in studies which amniotic fluid samples were obtained from pregnant women undergoing routine amniocentesis. Some of these women consumed garlic capsules prior to the procedure, whereas others consumed placebo capsules. Randomly selected pairs of samples, one from a woman who ingested garlic and the other from a woman who ingested placebo capsules, were then evaluated by a sensory panel of adults. The odor of the amniotic fluid obtained from women who had ingested the garlic capsules was judged to be stronger and more garlic-like than the samples collected from women consuming placebo capsules. Other research has shown that this effect generalizes to other foods and substances that the mother may ingest or inhale throughout pregnancy. These experiences continue after birth if the mother chooses to breastfeed. Research has shown that, like amniotic fluid, the flavor profile of breast milk also changes to reflect the mother's diet. As a result, children who are breastfed are exposed to a wide variety of flavors throughout pregnancy and their first year or two of life. And these flavor experiences are unique for each infant and reflect the culture and cuisine of the mother. This is in contrast to formula-fed infants who are fed milk that is invariant in flavor and does not reflect the cultural cuisine of the family. Because most animals, including humans, have an innate tendency to reject new flavors when they taste them for the first time, this pre-exposure of various flavors helps children to avoid the problem of novelty rejection once they start eating solid foods. Over the long term, exposure to flavors in amniotic fluid and breast milk may serve to heighten preferences for these flavors. Not only do children detect the flavor profile of amniotic fluid and breast milk, but they also form memories of and learn about these flavors through early sensory experiences. This has been demonstrated in an experimental investigation in which two groups of pregnant women drank either carrot juice or water during pregnancy and lactation, and a third group didn't drink carrot juice at any time. About 4 weeks after mothers had introduced cereal into their child's diet, experimenters assessed infants' responses to carrot-flavored baby cereal compared to plain cereal. And what they found was that infants who had been exposed to the flavor of carrots during pregnancy and during prenatal development ate more of the carrot-flavored cereal than infants who were not exposed to the flavor of carrots. These infants also appeared to enjoy the carrot-flavored cereal more, according to the mothers. Our research and that of others has shown that infants continue to learn about flavors after they are introduced to solid foods. Repeated exposure to a food such as green beans or to a variety of vegetables leads to increased consumption and liking of green beans. Moreover, we also found that after repeated exposure to green beans or vegetable variety, infants express fewer facial expressions of distaste. As I close my talk, many of you might wonder whether these early experiences that occur during fetal life, breastfeeding, and weaning have long-term effects on food preferences. And although there have been few longitudinal studies that have been conducted, data shows that fruit and vegetable intake in school-age children can be predicted by mother's preferences for healthy foods and therefore her dietary habits during pregnancy and early development, how long she breastfeeds her child, and the types of foods she feeds her child once she introduces solid food. Therefore, although children are predisposed to prefer sweetened foods and beverages and dislike bitter tasting vegetables, Early exposure to a variety of healthy foods sets the stage for preferences for healthy foods later in life. And that's where I'll end for today. Thank you.